All right. Hello and welcome back to the Financial Advocacy Podcast. I'm your host, David Kinder, registered financial consultant, charter life underwriter, with my co-hosts, Mike Moffitt and Kurt Gibbs. Today, we've got, I like to try to be current with current events and things. I do look at my, on Chrome. I look at my mobile news feed and I get some stupid headlines at times. You guys see some of this? You never know what's going to get published, and I got a good one, and I got to share it. Have you guys read? I sent you the link before. Have you guys seen this yet?
Yeah, this is a good one.
Okay, all right. So I want to make sure that I'm not throwing you any curveballs here. So this is MoneyWise. They put this out there. It says 53% of adults say they'd support slicing Social Security benefits for the rich Americans to save everyone else's. Is that a good idea or a slippery slope? Now, we've talked before, at least ourselves anyway, we've talked about the fact that we think that maybe one day Social Security might become means tested based on someone's other income. You might not get it at all. We've talked about how based on other income, it might at least be like your Roth IRA distributions might make your Social Security taxable. There's other theories out there and ways to kind of save Social Security. But here's the thing, slicing benefits for who? This is the interesting thing here. Because I started reading this. So, and again, this is recent. This is just last week. Social Security is one of America's most popular programs. 86% of Americans reporting a positive view of it. That's nice. According to University of Maryland's program for public consultation. I don't know what the hell that means. I think that just means they're going to do surveys. I don't know what that is. It sounds like a waste of educational dollars. But unfortunately, many are worried about its future. Over half of the surveys responded saying they've heard about its financial troubles. Duh, we've heard about that. We know that Social Security, if something isn't done, that the Social Security Trust Fund is going to run out by the end of 2035. Medicare is even worse. It would run out in the next 2 or 3 years or whatever it is. If it runs dry 2035, the program only be able to pay benefits out to it of incoming revenue. That's what FICA taxes are. If you ever look at your pay stubs, you see, what's this FICA? Who am I paying this to? It's not FICO. It's not a FICO score. It's FICA income. I can't even remember what it stands for right now, but I just know that it is essentially it's a tax, but it's really tax for your Social Security wage base up to, I think now it's like $165,000 of base income that becomes included for Social Security calculations and stuff. So this is the paragraph right here. Americans have some thoughts on how to fix the situation, though. In fact, 53% would support reducing benefits for the top 40% of earners. A move that would reduce the incoming shortfall by 23%. Would this be a good situation or cause more problems than it solves? I said, wait a minute, top 40% of which earners? Mm-hmm. Now, I'm like, what in the hell? You got to be careful of these surveys because it depends on how they structure the questions. I wish I could see the damn thing because this looks stupid. Now, if they said 40% of earners earning incomes above, let's throw out a number, 250,000, or 40% of earners above 400,000, right? Those numbers get thrown about, especially for election times and stuff. I could see some validity then. No, this is 40% of all earners. So, and they say it's still rich people. Cutting benefits for rich could have some big downsides. I'm like, what? No, this isn't rich people. We're going to go right here to the Social Security Administration, Social Security Online, Office of the Chief Actuary, wage statistics for 2022. And by the way, 2023 isn't quite out yet. This is based on, current tax returns and things like that. So let's go back 2022. Now, what would it take to be in the top 40% of earners? You guys want to throw out a guess?
It's well under 100,000.
Yeah, I 57.
57. Well, you're right in there. Okay, so to read this chart, which is a whole bunch of numbers, no one can read this unless you really want to become a nerd on it. The percent of total, we're going to look at what is the top 40%, which means where do we break in at 60? So we have up to 49,999 at 58.9, and then 50,000 plus at 63. It's right in here, 50,000 plus, essentially. Let's just call it 50,000. That's what they're talking about, reducing benefits for those at 50,000 and above. Now, I'm in California. That's almost poverty level. I think poverty level out here is 36,000 a year. I don't know the exact number. One day I might look it up, but it doesn't really apply to what I'm doing. They say if that's rich, that's a problem. Now, I also thought, you know what if I'm reading into this a little bit wrong? You know what if I'm interpreting what the top 40% are? It's like, okay, so I asked ChatGPT. I'm like, let's just see what the computer says. So I said, what income makes it the top 40% of earners in the United States? As the recent data to be in top 40% of earners, household income typically needs to be around 70,000 or more per year. And of course, depending on the source and the year of data collection. So to give a more detailed breakdown, top 40% starting around 70,000, top 20, 130,000 or more, top 10 is 200 or more, top 5 is only 300,000 or more, top 1 it generally requires an income of 500,000 or more. I don't know who wrote this damn survey, but these are not rich people here. I'm flabbergasted. So it makes me wonder, like, are people thinking about, and what it's coming down to, I believe, and I thought maybe we should rename this podcast and saying, don't follow the masses, because sometimes the M is silent. We just don't know. But the financial IQ of America is suffering greatly.
Well,
Go ahead, Mike.
no, I'm just going to, I think when people hear things like the top 40% of earners, most people automatically think, oh, that's not me. I'm not in that top 40%, not really realizing, they probably think, these are, like you said, people making $250,000 a year or more, or somewhere in that neighborhood. Most people don't think, if you were in somewhere in the ballpark of $50,000 to $70,000, that you're in the, top 40% of income earners. But when you actually look at the statistics, that's what it comes down to. And so when you ask just the general uneducated public that, just kind of doesn't pay much attention to these things, when you talk about, oh, let's tax the top 40%, that sounds great until you peel back the layers of the onion and start looking at it a little deeper. And then you realize, well, hey, wait a minute. I'm that top 40%, and I sure as heck don't feel rich. In fact, I can barely afford my mortgage and everything else. So, that's where the problem is that with these surveys and with you're asking the general public this stuff, most people don't realize that this affects them more than they think it's going to. And especially if you look into the future where inflation and earnings is only going to go up, this stuff doesn't generally adjust for that, as we've seen in the past. So, and it brings up that slippery slope point. Well, okay, where does it stop? And how do you stop it from continuing to snowball down the hill?
The only thing I could think of, and I'm trying to be as pragmatic as possible, because we're not trying to be political here. This is all about the math. This is the math and the statistics. Granted, our political biases might actually show up, and that's something to share later. But this is really all about the math, and it's about the real statistics and actuarial assumption. In fact, that's the Office of the Chief Actuary of Social Security. That we cited earlier. And the only time that I think that it can break would be when your earnings are the same as your Social Security benefit. Once it's even, then that's it. It's just unfortunate that these surveys, I think that they're slanted in a certain way to get a certain response, and of course it's just terrible. So looking at this, if the top 40% of earners lost promised benefits after paying into the system, the 80% approval rating for Social Security could disappear quickly. This large population of wealthier individuals is often well-connected and politically active. Many would stop supporting Social Security to express their opinion at the ballot box, putting its future in peril. Here's the funny part. If they actually went after the rich people, then there would be enough voters to change it. because the rich, as we just saw in the statistic, would be at the top 1%, 1 out of 100. They can't make the difference other than throwing their money, to their preferred candidate. But no, there's so many contradictions here, unfortunately, that this is such a BS article, but it can get us thinking that, okay, they're going to come after our Social Security, but only for the top 40% of wealthy people. No, they're coming after you. That's scary to me. Now, but at the same time, we don't know what we don't know. And so, hey, Alonzo, glad to see you, my friend. I want to talk about something else that was in political news recently, 6 months ago. Republican candidate, GOP candidate, Nikki Haley had proposed, and she did this at was that one of the primary debates, talking about increasing the age of retirement for Americans. And she was booed and everything. Oh, we can't have that. I don't want it. It was almost like the French. I remember it was a couple of years ago. They talked about, they had riots about their benefits being later. And so Nikki Haley was saying we should change the retirement benefit age. And they're talking about Social Security retirement. Let's change it for those that are currently in their 20s. Let's stretch that out. Statistically, they're going to live longer. We've got better health. We got better medicines. We got better healthcare, all that stuff. It should stretch out. It shouldn't be 65. And everybody started booing. And the thing is that what I don't think most people understand is that claiming your Social Security benefits is a completely separate decision than actually retiring. They're two different things. And so granted, she should have been more specific, saying talk about Social Security, not just retirement in general. I don't remember how she exactly said it, but the fact is that if we're talking about Social Security, let's talk about claiming that you can quit whenever you want, but you're going to need to be able to foot the bill out of your other savings, wherever it's coming from. And then you can choose to claim your Social Security at any time. That makes the most sense. And by the way, the longer you delay, the better the benefit is, at least according to current metrics. We often recommend to people delay claiming your Social Security until age 70, if at all possible, unless you don't have the funds or you're not healthy. Those are the two main reasons to start claiming that early. If you might as well. But if you're going to be around, and especially if you're married, Social Security has the survivor benefit. Remember that the remaining spouse gets the higher of the two benefits, not both. But if you can delay the higher earning breadwinners benefit to claim it at its highest amount, then they'll receive that benefit going forward. So it's a better way to plan for when you pass. So a little bit of kind of estate retirement planning there.
And maybe we could even do another episode just on something like that kind of topic, because I think that the math is pretty interesting there if you look at it, depending on where your break-even point is, right? So if it makes sense to claim it when you're first eligible, or if it makes sense to delay it. I think we could have a whole episode just on that. But
oh yeah,
go ahead.
But just look at the headlines here. Working until your 70s. No one's saying if you have the means, you can quit it whenever you want. We're only talking about when you're claiming your Social Security. Two different benefits, two different things to consider. So anyway, it was just an interesting thing here that I'm noticing that unfortunately we don't have enough. We just don't have enough financial IQ in terms of making quality decisions for our understanding Social Security, understand who's really in the top 40%, knowing when to claim, and I don't even get me started on the latest one. Trump is fishing for votes as we speak. I'm sure you guys have seen this here. I'm going to play this quick video real quick.
Announcing that as part of our tax cuts, we will make interest on car loans fully deductible.
He's doing this in Detroit.
So we're going to make it fully deductible, the interest payments. That's going to revolutionize your industry. This will stimulate massive domestic auto production and make car ownership dramatically more affordable for millions and millions of working American families. This is a phenomenal thing.
I don't think Trump has done the math on that. First of all, car prices are so high right now as it is anyway, right? they're so expensive. And then we're going to itemize our interest that we pay on a car loan. But can we itemize that in the first place? Because the standard deduction is so high. Right? So who's going to really benefit from that? Right now, it's pandering to the crowd. I don't see that being a real benefit. Doesn't mean that we're not voting for them or whatever. I'm just saying that it makes so little to no difference. It's just a headline right now. And unfortunately, we don't necessarily have the financial IQ as Americans to be able to see through some of this stuff. It's becoming a problem. I'm just seeing that we're being played based on the fact that we don't have the financial IQ as a general population of Americans. And it's from either side, because they're not understanding how we're trying to save Social Security. They're not understanding who we're trying to cut it for. And we're not understanding how the tax code works, but we're trying to deduct loan interest on a $75,000 car these days. My gosh, these things are nuts. Okay, I think that's my rant. Your guys' thoughts?
Well, I'll just say this. You're exactly right about everything to do with Social Security, or for that matter, just, money in general when it comes to your retirement or your Social Security. It's so complicated to figure out exactly what applies to, the individual, because just like the rules and how Social Security has changed in the last, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years with the claiming benefits, and some people were grandfathered into a different, a different plan, if you will, for lack of a better understanding on how they phrase it, or how they come
This
up with
file and suspend thing,
Yeah,
and there's something else that I can't remember right now, and which those things are essentially not valid anymore. Essentially,
yeah. I mean, and the fact that what you brought up, Mike, I think brought up about the the when to claim and when not to claim, and things like that. Then and now you've got just what came out in the last week. I haven't really kept up with it, but I guess they declared what the COLA is going to be on it this for this next year is like 2.5, maybe
2.5%. That's what I saw. Yeah.
So it's just how do you plan for that, so to speak, if you're on the edge of wanting to take your social, or wanting to delay it? What factors really play into when you should take it, when you should not? It is a guarantee, I think, that will never go away. I do think it will always be in place in some form. You see these news ads, like just kind of like what you kind of alluded to with what you've been showing us here is, they run these ads and they make these statements about things, and people would panic over it, different things that they read into the language, just like that 40% number. I mean, who out there really feels like they're rich? I mean, I read a thing just last couple of weeks where, with inflation the way it's been the last 3 or 4 years, that the average family of 4, I think it was costing them like they say $12,000 in groceries alone over that same time period. And it's just, it's a lot of factors going on out there that, and the poverty level, as you kind of mentioned out there in California with 36, I could definitely see where that's an issue and that's a problem. But it's not just California; it's a problem, across the board.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I just have my thought and it escaped me. I hate it when that happens.
But and just while you're trying to figure it out, well, maybe you'll come up with it here in a second. But just like, and Mike, you can probably talk to this a little better than I could, because you're much more well versed in it. But I guess the amount of adjustment that you get on your Social Security also impacts your Medicare, and how much you're going to have to pay in the premium. So a lot of so many moving parts and we're just talking about Social Security.
Yeah. And so one of the things that we advocate for is, yes, we want to optimize Social Security, but it's not a decision that's made on its own. And it needs to be coordinated with everything else you have, including the tax status of everything else you have. Because however your income is taxed in retirement may determine how much, not just of your Social Security gets taxed, but whether you get it at all.
Exactly.
Imagine if all these people on that first article, imagine if they're all voting. And they are voting to say, yes, we're going to cut. And this is the way it will read in the ballot. Y'all get a ballot summary of, here's the pros and the cons, but we're going to cut Social Security for the top 40% of income earners. And you're going to say, yeah, I'm all for that, not realizing you just cut it for yourself, but I'm all for that. Let's do it. And they don't realize that just hurt yourself. And yet, depend on where your other retirement wealth is will determine whether you get a benefit, let alone how much in taxes you pay on it. So if we can shift everything using the current tax code to help you to position yourself to optimize everything with not a non-compromised retirement, wouldn't that be the ultimate way to go? Now, it's going to be different than what everybody else thinks it's going to be. But if that could happen, using the tax code and the way that some of today's insurance contracts work, wouldn't that be a great way to put you in a better position financially speaking? Because frankly, the rate of return on your money doesn't matter anymore. It's the scariest thing because it's all of these external forces that impact your total retirement well-being that needs to be factored in. That your rate of return doesn't matter. You could try to fight that and combat it using rate of return, or we could take the exit ramp and you find a totally different way of managing your retirement fund so that you can optimize everything for your benefit.
And a little bit to your point there, I had an interesting conversation. I guess it was Thursday or Friday last week, and I shared this with our group this week. That I had a gentleman that, and very few people I think recognize this, but here's a guy that was 55, 56 years old, and he said, Kurt, I don't think my 401k is going to get me to where I want to go. Now, how many times do we as a group talk about? We know that's fact. It's not gonna do what it was intended to really do in your mind. It's
Right.
doing what the institutions want it to do, and it's doing what the federal government wants it to do. But I guess he just had that epiphany that I've been throwing all this money in there, and why is my account not bigger? And I'm paying more tax this year than I've ever paid, or whatever the factor is. And when it comes to Social Security, now there is no better time than the present to get from one bucket to the other bucket and get as much of that out of the tax bucket as you can, because it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, your tax rate's going up. I mean, it's just you need to get aware of what's going on around you and take a harder look at where your money's at, what you think it's doing for you, and have that evaluated from someone that has your best interest in mind, and not the taxation that the federal government's getting off of, whether it be Social Security or your qualified retirement plan.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, and in a way, kind of to sum up, because I'm done with my talking points, but I'm thinking about, there's a person in our group. He was out in Colorado, right? And he had his license plate. It said 0 tax. And he pulled up into a coffee shop, and someone says, "I hate your license plate." "Oh, really? Why is that?" "Well, you're part of the problem." "Really?" And he offers her, let me buy a cup of coffee. I'd like to hear more of what you think. And after going through it all, realizing, well, how much is it that she and her husband earns? That puts them in the top, let's say 5%. And you know what? You're the problem. Once they understand who their target is, like, wait a minute, I am the problem. I like your license plate. I mean, so all they got to do is realize, who are they really going after? The headline, the 1% is not as elusive as one thinks. It's targets far more people. In the booklet I've written, are you a target for higher taxes? Here's the top 10%. Here's the top 5. Here's the top 1. It's not as high up as you think it is.
No, and we know how the IRS identifies, all of us based off your tax
return.
So who comes up with these numbers, right? It's pretty easy to find out, where all this is generated from.
It's unfortunately, it's shocking and yet not surprising. Unfortunately, I've got to summarize that.
It's not, and back to your statement about the article and the 40% and where the thresholds were on the numbers and the 2 questions you asked us, and we said that it fell somewhere between right over 50,000. How many people out there, whether you're married filing jointly or you're married and 2 kids or 3 kids, how many of those people that, let's say, make $125,000 a year, household, how many of those feel rich?
Or feel like they're in the top 1%.
Or that's where I was going next. Or feel like you're in that top 1%.
Yeah, I mean they may be comfortable, right? But they're not going to say, oh, I'm in the top 1%. No, nobody, with a family is going.
No one's bragging. No one's
right.
bragging.
Especially if you live in an area like California or New York or somewhere that has a high cost.
Illinois.
Chicago, right? So if you're making $125,000 a year and you live in one of these expensive places with high taxes and all the other stuff that goes with it, and you have kids and everything else, making $125,000 a year sounds nice, and it is, but you're the one that's being targeted in all these things.
What's interesting though is that now let's look at it from a life cycle perspective, because if we're in our, let's say, mid 30s through mid 50s, right, we're not necessarily looking at our long-term wealth, and we're looking at the tax code thinking we got our child tax credit, we've got our mortgage interest, hopefully, and we're contributing to our 401ks. So as a tax perspective, we're thinking we're doing pretty good, not necessarily realizing that we're just kicking the can down the line.
Mm-hmm.
Because what's going to happen in retirement? Well, your kids are up and grown. They're going to still ask you for money, but they're going to be up and grown. So you're not going to be able to claim that deduction anymore. You're going to be pulling money out of your 401k. And unless you actually refinance your home might actually be in the later stages of the mortgage, which means it's more principal payments than interest, which means that you're not going to have that same deduction based on the same amortization. Now, if you refinance, you're restarting the amortization clock again. That's a whole different conversation. And we had Steve Smither on, not too long ago, so we could talk to him about, refinancing if that fits for you. But all those tax deductions you've got now are going to phase out, even if your income doesn't increase.
And we have no idea what the taxes will be at that point either. And that's the other thing. And I mean, at least I think the consensus amongst the three of us is that taxes have to go up at some point in the future. How much? I guess you could debate that. But at some point,
who?
Right. At some point, they're going to have to go up. But I think the other thing that's interesting, going back to this car thing, the car loan thing, just real quick, because so let's say that they allow you to write off the interest. I can see this as a problem for the consumer from an interest rate perspective, because now banks and other lending and financial institutions are going to say, well, hey, we can, loan a car for 10, 15%. You get to write off the interest. So all these lending institutions are going to maybe, you never know, raise car loan rates. And it sounds nice. Look, you get a nice tax deduction. Who cares if your interest rate is 15%, but.
And they're going to lengthen that car loan to 7, 8, 9 years. And that car is not going to last that long. There's some that will. I don't trust the American car industry. That's my opinion.
That's another one of these slippery slope things, right? So it sounds
you'll be upside down in that car real quick, regardless of the taxes. You're going to be upside down in that car. It'd be harder to trade that in and get above water, more or less.
The tiny little tax deduction that you're going to get is going to be nothing compared to what it's going to explode your car payment to. If banks can justify charging higher loan rates by saying, "Oh, don't worry, you'll get a tax deduction."
Which brings us back to another part, that if, depending on where your wealth is, borrow against a life insurance policy and use that to buy your car and pay that back. Restore your collateral capacity. Yes, there'll be an interest cost. So what? There would be a smaller interest cost, and it's going to be based on simple interest, not amortized interest, which is a very big deal. And for some people, I might have just said something in Greek, but amortized heaps all of your interest payments up front, and you start paying it down little by little in terms of the principal. Whereas simple interest, it's done basically on a per year basis. And so it charges less. Even for the same interest rate, it's less than compared to an amortization loan. So there's other ways to take better control of your money. So I'd say don't fall for the pitches of the politicians. Now, granted, one might be a more of an evil than the other, and maybe you're casting your vote to be anti one person. Hey, whatever it is, but I'm just saying don't fall for the pitches. And I've got to be careful how I say that because I almost said it in a different way. And we've got a woman that's running for president, and if I said it the wrong way, that could have sounded really bad. But anyway, no, this is just my rant on all this stuff because we're just, unfortunately, I don't think the American public is exercising a lot more critical thinking, and I really wish that there was a better understanding of the statistics of income, of tax rates, of how Social Security works, how interest works on car loans, because people are just they're buying into it. It seems like, without really giving it some thought. Especially, I'm going to deduct my interest, but my standard deduction is already so high. I don't itemize anything anyway. I mean, if you're not itemizing, you can't deduct. It doesn't. It washes out. It doesn't help. So those are my thoughts. That's my rant.
Yeah, I mean,
any other thoughts?
It's like a lot of other things. It sounds nice on the surface, right? It sounds like a good idea. And if you just go to ask the common person off the street, do you think we should tax the 40% of the wealthy more? Most people are going to be like, heck yeah, I'm for that. They're the wealthiest, right? But then what they don't realize is because they've never looked at the statistics, they've never done the math, they've never looked at any of these things. They don't realize they just approved the tax for themselves because they happen to fall into that category. So, that's how a lot of these things I think are. A lot of people, they like these surface ideas. They like the idea of tax the rich, tax the wealthy, all of that stuff. Well, the question now becomes, who are they considering to be wealthy, and at what point does that start? And that's very subjective. And depending on who writes these laws, bills, whatever, it could very well affect you. And you certainly, I don't think anybody, for the most part, with a family at least, making $70,000 a year in the upper end of what we were looking at, feels like they're, very wealthy or very well off per se. Certainly depending on where you live. So
right.
It's just, you got to be careful when these ideas are approached to you. And you got to take a little bit closer look at it and say, okay, who is this really affecting? And step back and look at the math and the numbers. Because like I said, on the surface, it sounds great. Sure, let's tax the rich. The problem is, who are we considering rich? And that's where you have to really dig into it and figure out who it is that's actually going to be affected by this.
Have you guys read the book or seen the movies of Atlas Shrugged?
No, I haven't.
All right, you need to. Atlas Shrugged, it's a very dystopian view of the future, but it was written in the 50s by Ayn Rand. And, of course, we got the movies, and I like the movies because I don't have to think as much. I don't have to read the long speeches that go on for pages and pages and pages. But they introduce all these different bills, right? And they call it the anti-dog-eat-dog bill and all this stuff that sounds so good, but they don't realize that they're just entrapping themselves through these good intentions of these politicians. I swear we're living in dystopian times in a way, and just because the people will pass these and the Congress will pass these things. There's a thing called if you can find it on YouTube, Directive 10289. When that thing gets passed, and it freezes everything, basically introduces communism. Now, some people might be in favor of that, but I'm not. I'm all for more freedoms. I don't want to be told what to do and how to show up and all that stuff. Having a job is one thing, but being a slave to the state is a whole nother thing entirely. So anyway, we have to be careful of the financial IQ and the economic understanding of the things that are being talked about. I want to think. I wish that there would be more of a man on the street kind of a thing. Say, would you vote for this? Oh, by the way, you just voted this for yourself. That's what I'd like to see.
That might be an interesting episode if the three of us are ever together. Sometime we could set up a little booth on the street and say, hey, what do you think?
Oh,
Oh my God! I mean, you see, okay, this is the old Tonight Show. Jay Leno going on the street asking questions about U.S. history and stuff like that, and yeah, that would
there's
be
stuff like that on TikTok and YouTube.
there's
And all
stuff
kinds
like
of
that could be fun. I don't know when we could do that. It'd have to be next year, but that would be fun. We'll have to write that down and make that an agenda at some point.
Just
Maybe
set up a
if
little tent or something somewhere and have a list of questions for people.
we could do it. Okay, I'm thinking. Obviously, we didn't plan this, but we could do this at if we're doing the next if the convention's happening again in February, and if we're all there, we could do it in the lobby, the hotel lobby, and just ask people. And one person's filming, and one person's asking the questions, and we got the first thing here, and we flip it to the next page. And did you know? And you got to make sure it's government statistics. Got to make sure it's something that they're going to trust, not something that can appear made up or anything like that. It's like, no, I had no idea that that's the way that is. Oh, interesting. Depending on where your wealth is, might determine how much in taxes you pay. Would you like to schedule an appointment? That could be a whole prospecting thing right there. That's prospecting right there. I'm telling you, all we need to do is bring up that awareness, and people should be lining up and seeing, sitting with us and showing up. Here's the situation. What do you want to do about it? That's the question. What do you want to do? I'm okay. Are you okay? We can help you if you want.
What are your thoughts,
Okay.
Kurt?
I'm open, but that would be interesting.
Kurt's like, he's got staff to do that.
I got a year to think about it.
Hey, we got about 4 months.
You've got like 3.5, 4 months. Yeah.
Oh, well, true. Yeah.
You better
You're gonna
hurry
have to
up.
tell us as long as everything's on track, and we can figure that out. So
Yeah. Okay.
all right. Well, this has been a great conversation, shorter than our last previous ones, but I just had a rant on this thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you all next time. Hit like, share, comment, subscribe. Do all the things. We'll catch you next week. We're gonna have a special guest next week.
Before we go, real
Okay.
quick, just a reminder: Medicare annual enrollment started today.
Oh, that's right.
So we did have an episode a couple weeks ago. What was it? About a month ago?
Yeah, maybe
2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Yeah.
Somewhere in there, but
It's
we can
here.
pin it. It's here. But we can pin it in the comments and be sure to check that out. I went over all the stuff for Medicare, so if that's something that you're unfamiliar with and you kind of want to learn the high level basics of Medicare and how everything works, that's a great episode to check out with AEP being here and all that stuff. And if you need anything, I guess I'm the Medicare guru on the panel, so reach out
Better
to
you
me.
than me. But yes, that stuff. And quite frankly, if you're like me, if you just want someone to demystify it, just reach out to Mike. He'll take care of you. So
Yeah.
Perfect.
So okay, now we can go.
All right.
guys. We'll catch you all next week.
See ya.